My wife divorced me and took everything. You'll die broken alone, she laughed. So I donated plasma for $40. Then the nurse saw my blood test and three men in suits rushed in. After 32 years, we finally found you. All right, Reddit. This happened 6 months ago, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. My ex-wife told me I'd die broke and alone. She was wrong about pretty much everything, but we'll get to that. Here's how my life went from complete disaster to something I couldn't have scripted in my wildest dreams. I'm Ethan, 45 male, and until about a year ago, I thought I had a decent life. Married to Jessica, 42 female, for 17 years. Worked at the same marketing firm for 18 years. Owned a modest house in the suburbs, had the standard two-car garage, and a retirement account I actually contributed to. Nothing fancy, but stable, comfortable. The American dream on a middle-class budget. Let me give you some context about how normal everything seemed before it all went sideways. I grew up in a working-class family in Ohio. Dad was an electrician, Mom worked part-time at the library. They taught me the value of showing up, doing the work, and living within your means. Nothing revolutionary, just basic common sense that seems to be in short supply these days. I put myself through state college working nights at a grocery store, graduated with a marketing degree, and $18,000 in student loans that I paid off in 6 years. That's the kind of guy I am. Methodical, responsible, maybe boring by some standards. But I always figured boring was better than broke. The job was solid. Senior account manager at Morrison & Associates, a mid-sized marketing firm that handled regional clients. Nothing glamorous, but I was good at what I did. Built relationships with clients, understood their needs, delivered results. My performance reviews were always strong. I'd worked my way up from junior copywriter to managing a team of 8 people. I remember my 10th anniversary at the company. They gave me a plaque and a bonus. Jessica seemed proud that day, posted about it on social media with some caption about my hard-working husband. Looking back, that might have been the last time she actually seemed proud of me. After that, the complaints started. Everyone else's husband is moving up faster, she'd say. Brandon just made partner at his firm. Why aren't you pushing for more? Brandon was her friend Ashley's husband, and apparently the benchmark for all masculine achievement in Jessica's world. The comparisons got worse over time. It wasn't just Brandon. It was Ashley's new kitchen renovation that we couldn't afford. It was their annual trips to Europe that we couldn't take. It was their Tesla in the driveway while we drove a 6-year-old Honda Accord. Never mind that Brandon worked 70-hour weeks and barely saw his kids. Never mind that Ashley constantly complained about feeling like a single parent. All Jessica saw was the stuff. Lauren's husband surprised her with a Rolex for their anniversary, she'd mentioned casually. What are you getting me? I got her a nice necklace I'd saved up for. Cost me $800. She opened it, said thanks, and I never saw her wear it. Found out later she'd returned it and bought shoes instead. Didn't even tell me, just exchanged it like I wouldn't notice. The truth was, I liked where I was. My job paid well enough. $92,000 a year plus bonuses, had good benefits, didn't require 70-hour weeks, and let me have a life outside the office. I could make it to my nephew's baseball games, could take a Saturday to help my dad fix his deck, could actually use my vacation days without feeling guilty. But Jessica had started comparing everything. Our house to her friends' houses, our cars to their cars, our vacations to their vacations. Nothing was ever quite enough. Then last year, the company lost its 3 biggest clients in a 2-month span. Not my fault. One company got bought out, another went bankrupt, and the third moved everything in-house. But when corporate decided to cut costs, senior managers with 18 years of seniority and full benefits packages were expensive. They laid off 6 of us in one day. I came home that Tuesday afternoon, still processing what had happened, and told Jessica. Her face didn't show sympathy or concern. It showed panic, then anger. What do you mean they let you go? What are we supposed to do now? I'll find something else. I've got severance, unemployment, and solid references. The job market for marketing. You're 45 years old, Ethan. Nobody wants to hire middle-aged men. Do you know what this does to us? To me, that conversation set the tone for everything that followed. Instead of, we'll figure this out together, it was, you failed us. Instead of support, I got lectures about my lack of ambition, my complacency, how she'd wasted years on a man who couldn't provide. Within a week, I got served divorce papers. She'd filed the day after I got laid off. Not even a pretense of trying to work things out. Her lawyer was this shark named Patricia Rothman, who specialized in taking men apart in divorce court. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Jessica's legal strategy was simple. portray me as an unemployed deadbeat who couldn't support himself, let alone contribute to a marriage. Never mind that I'd paid the mortgage for 17 years, that I'd been the primary breadwinner for most of our marriage, that I'd put her through a marketing certification program she never finished. Patricia Rothman, Jessica's lawyer, was a piece of work. First meeting, she came at me like I was some kind of criminal, demanded full financial disclosure, questioned every purchase I'd made in the last 5 years, tried to paint me as financially reckless because I'd bought a motorcycle 8 years ago, a used bike that I'd paid $3,500 for, and sold 3 years later for $2,800. But in Patricia's narrative, I was some kind of irresponsible man-child wasting money on toys. Meanwhile, Jessica conveniently forgot to mention the $4,200 she'd spent on a girls' trip to Nashville the year before, or the $1,800 designer handbag I'd given her for Christmas that she absolutely had to have, or the fact that she'd gone through 3 different small business ideas in 5 years, each one requiring startup costs that came from our joint account, and none of them ever generating a single dollar in profit. Her lawyer presented bank statements showing my recent spending, unemployment barely covering basic expenses, occasional splurges on takeout because I was too depressed to cook. Made it look like I was spiraling financially. Never mentioned that I'd been the stable one for 17 years, while Jessica bounced between part-time jobs and entrepreneurial fantasies. My lawyer was decent but overworked, and I couldn't afford his hourly rate for long once my severance started running out. He charged $300 an hour, and every email exchange, every phone call, every document review added up. I burned through $8,000 in legal fees before we even got to court. Jessica, meanwhile, had help from her parents and apparently had been preparing for this. She had documentation of every purchase I'd made, every checking account withdrawal, built this narrative that I was financially irresponsible, despite having been the stable one for nearly 2 decades. The judge looked at the facts. I was unemployed, she had a job, I had no immediate prospects, she was financially vulnerable. Never mind that she'd filed before I even had time to job hunt. Never mind that she'd been planning this exit strategy while I was still bringing home a paycheck. I got to keep my clothes, my dad's old watch that he'd left me when he passed, and my personal items. That's it. The house went to Jessica. She'd keep it until it sold. Then we'd split proceeds, except her legal fees came out first. The car I'd been driving went to her because it was technically in both names, and she needed reliable transportation. My 401k got split. The savings account got drained by legal fees. When everything was finalized, I had $183 in my checking account and a storage unit full of boxes. I moved into a studio apartment in a building where the elevator worked maybe half the time. The place was maybe 400 square feet, including the bathroom. My bed was a futon that smelled like someone else's regrets. The worst part wasn't even the financial devastation. It was the night the divorce was finalized. Around 9 p.m., my phone rang. Jessica's number. I almost didn't answer, but some part of me thought maybe, just maybe, she was calling to apologize, or at least acknowledge that things had gotten out of hand. I answered. Hello? Ethan? It's me. Her voice was cheerful, almost giddy. I just wanted to call and let you know. You'll die alone and broke. That's what happens to boring men like you, Ethan. Brandon says I should have left you years ago. Brandon. My former business partner at the firm. The guy who'd been my friend since college, who was best man at our wedding, who I'd helped get hired at Morrison and Associates 5 years ago. Brandon, who apparently had been telling my wife for years that she could do better. Brandon and I are together now, she continued, like she was sharing good news. He says you were always dead weight, at work and at home. He's taking me to Cancun next month. When's the last time you took me anywhere nice? I couldn't speak. My brain just shut down. Anyway, I wanted you to hear it from me. Good luck with your sad little life. Don't call me again. She hung up and I could hear her laughing before the line went dead. I sat in that depressing studio apartment for 3 hours, staring at the wall. The futon squeaked every time I moved. The neighbor upstairs was blasting music. The refrigerator hummed like it was dying, and I kept hearing her voice. You'll die alone and broke. The next 2 months were survival mode. I sent out probably 200 job applications, got maybe 15 interviews, made it to final rounds 3 times, got rejected each time. The market was tight, and 45-year-old ex-managers with gaps in their employment were not hot commodities. I did freelance gigs on Fiverr, wrote blog posts for $25, designed social media campaigns for $50. It barely covered rent. I was eating ramen and canned soup, the kind that's 39 cents at the discount grocery store. I'd walk past restaurants and remember when spending $15 on lunch didn't feel like a major financial decision. The studio apartment was its own special hell. 400 square feet of depression, with neighbors I could hear through the walls and a refrigerator that hummed like it was dying. I lost weight. Not from some healthy diet plan, from eating one real meal a day and trying to ignore hunger pangs. My mom called every week. She was on a fixed income, living in a retirement community in Florida. Couldn't help financially, but wanted to know I was okay. I lied to her every time. Things are looking up, Mom. Got some good leads. She didn't believe me, but didn't push. By month 3, I had $40 in my account and rent due in a week. That's when I saw the flyer on a telephone pole. Donate plasma. Earn up to $40 per donation. I'd walked past that plasma donation center on Fletcher Street 100 times and never thought twice about it. But $40 was $40. It could buy groceries for a few days, give me a buffer, maybe keep the lights on a little longer. The place was depressing. Fluorescent lights that hummed and flickered, plastic chairs from maybe the 1990s, medical equipment that looked like it came from a hospital liquidation sale. The waiting room had maybe 8 people, all of us with that same desperate look. Young guy in the corner who couldn't have been older than 23, face covered in tattoos, bouncing his leg nervously. Older woman who might have been 60, clutching a worn purse and staring at the wall. A couple in their 30s, whispering to each other about rent money. We weren't here for altruistic reasons. We were here because we needed the money. The walls had posters about plasma donation saving lives, about how you could earn up to $400 a month. Someone had scrawled in pen on one poster, "If you're lucky." The carpet was industrial grade, the kind that would survive nuclear war, but looked like it had already been through one. The whole place smelled like antiseptic and sadness. I filled out the paperwork, medical history, current medications, list of every drug I'd never taken. The clipboard was missing its pen, so I had to ask for one. The receptionist, a tired woman named Paula, barely looked at me. She had that 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd seen too many desperate people walk through these doors. First-time donor? You'll get $40 today, $60 if you come back within 7 days. Photo ID and social security card? I handed them over. She made copies, gave me a clipboard with more forms. Someone will call you back in a few minutes. There's water in that cooler if you're thirsty. Stay hydrated. She said it like she'd said it 10,000 times before, words worn smooth through repetition. The water cooler looked like it hadn't been cleaned since the Clinton administration. I drank from it anyway because the paperwork said you needed to be hydrated for donation. The water tasted like plastic and disappointment. 20 minutes later, a nurse called my name. Ethan Williams? She was maybe 30. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, scrubs with cartoon characters on them. Looked like Snoopy and Charlie Brown. Name tag said Amy. She led me to a small room with a medical chair and various machines I didn't understand. The chair was worn leather with duct tape covering some tears. The machines looked newer than everything else, at least. Okay, Ethan. I'm going to take your vitals, do a quick health screening, and draw some blood for testing. The actual donation takes about an hour. Any questions? How often can I do this? Twice a week, with at least 1 day between donations. Some of our regular donors come every Tuesday and Thursday like clockwork. She wrapped the blood pressure cuff around my arm. It felt like the universe telling me this was my future. Coming to this depressing place twice a week to sell my blood for gas money. 120/78. That's good. Heart rate normal. You're healthier than most people who come in here. She drew several vials of blood, labeled them carefully. I'll send these to the lab. Results take about 5 minutes. I'll be right back. She wasn't. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15. I watched through the window as Amy sat at a computer terminal in the office area, staring at the screen. Her face changed, from routine boredom to confusion, then something else. She picked up a phone, spoke rapidly to someone, her free hand gesturing at the monitor. In that way people do when they're trying to explain something they don't fully understand. Another staff member joined her. Older guy, maybe the lab supervisor. He looked at the screen, then at me through the window, then back at the screen. His mouth formed a perfect O of surprise. Then a third person arrived, younger woman in scrubs, and all 3 of them were staring at that computer like it was showing them lottery numbers. Amy's conversation on the phone got more animated. I could see her nodding, writing things down, checking the monitor again. The other 2 staff members were talking to each other, one of them pulling out what looked like a medical textbook and flipping through pages. She hung up the phone and came back in. Her hands were shaking slightly. "Sir," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "I need you to stay exactly where you are. Don't move. I need to call someone. What's wrong? Is something wrong with my blood? Just, please wait. Someone's coming to explain everything. Am I dying? Do I have cancer or something? No, no, nothing like that. But I really can't explain. Someone will be here very soon. She left again, and I watched her make another phone call. This time her voice was more urgent. I caught fragments through the door. Confirmed 3 times. Genetic markers match. You need to come immediately. 20 minutes later, the front door burst open. 3 men in expensive suits walked in. Not walked, stormed. The kind of suits that cost more than my car used to. The lead guy was maybe 65. Silver hair, charcoal suit that probably cost 5 grand. He had this intensity to him, like a man on a mission. He walked straight to my room, and Amy stepped aside. The man just stood there for a moment, staring at me like I was some kind of miracle. His eyes actually had tears in them. After 32 years, he whispered. After 32 years of searching, we finally found you. I'm sorry. Who are you? He seemed to remember himself. My name is Robert Sterling. I'm the CEO of Sterling Pharmaceuticals. And Mr. Williams, what we've discovered in your blood is nothing short of miraculous. They moved me to a private office in the back. Proper office, not the donation rooms. Dark wood desk, leather chairs, diplomas on the walls. One of the suits turned out to be the center's director, who apparently dropped everything when Amy called. The other was Sterling's head of research, Dr. Philip Hayes. Robert Sterling sat across from me, hands folded on the desk, and I watched this 65-year-old billionaire try to compose himself. Mr. Williams, he began, and his voice had this weight to it, like every word was carefully chosen. Are you familiar with Kellerman syndrome? No. He pulled out a folder, opened it to show me medical charts I didn't understand. Graphs, numbers, technical terms that might as well have been written in another language. It's a genetic disorder that attacks the nervous system in children. Usually appears between ages 3 and 8. The first signs are subtle. A child drops things more often, struggles with buttons, has trouble with tasks they used to do easily. Parents often think it's just clumsiness, a phase. But then it progresses. He paused, staring at one of the charts like it was showing him something from his own past. The disease causes progressive loss of motor function. Walking becomes difficult, then impossible. Fine motor control disappears. The nervous system essentially short circuits, sending the wrong signals, then fewer signals, then eventually nothing. Cognitive decline follows. Not always, but often enough. And it's universally fatal. Average life expectancy after diagnosis is 18 months. Some children last 2 years. Very few make it to 3. There is no cure. Or rather, there wasn't. He pulled out another document. This one looked like a photograph that had been printed and reprinted many times over the years. A little girl with dark hair and his same eyes sitting in a wheelchair, smiling despite everything. In 1992, my daughter Rebecca was diagnosed with Kellerman's. She was 9 years old. Active kid. Played soccer, loved gymnastics, was always moving. Then one day she tripped during practice. Just a simple fall, nothing major. But she kept falling. Over and over. Took her to 3 different doctors before one of them recognized what we were dealing with. His voice cracked slightly. We tried everything. Experimental treatments in the US. Trials in Europe and Asia. Alternative medicine that probably did nothing but gave us something to hope for. I spent over $2 million chasing any possibility, no matter how remote. None of it worked. I watched my daughter lose the ability to walk, to feed herself, to write her name. She died 3 months before her 12th birthday, and there was nothing I could do to save her. The silence in that room was heavy. The other 2 men weren't looking at Robert anymore, probably because they'd heard this story before and knew how much it cost him to tell it. I'm sorry for your loss, but I don't understand what this has to do with me. Dr. Hayes spoke up. Mr. Williams, after his daughter's death, Robert sold his software company and founded Sterling Pharmaceuticals with one mission: find a cure for Kellerman's syndrome. We've spent 32 years researching this disease. We've tested hundreds of thousands of blood samples looking for specific genetic markers that might help us develop a treatment. And you have them, Robert said quietly. You have a genetic mutation so rare that we estimate only 3 to 5 people on Earth possess it. Your blood produces antibodies that can treat Kellerman's syndrome. Not just treat it, reverse it. Stop it completely. I stared at them. You're saying my blood can cure this disease? Yes. Your plasma contains proteins that, when processed and administered to Kellerman's patients, essentially rewrites the faulty genetic sequence causing the disorder. We tested your sample 3 times. Then we called our main lab in Boston and had them run it twice more. It's not a mistake. How is that even possible? We don't fully understand it yet, Dr. Hayes admitted. The mutation appears to be naturally occurring. You were born with it. It's dominant, meaning if you have children, they'd likely inherit it. But finding someone with this specific marker? He shook his head. The odds are astronomical. Robert leaned forward. Mr. Williams, we would like to offer you a contract. We need your plasma to develop and manufacture this treatment. We're not talking about a one-time donation. We're talking about regular donations that we would process into a viable therapy. How much? $15 million. The room went silent. I thought I'd misheard. I'm sorry, what? 15 million. 10 million upfront, 5 million spread over the next 5 years as you provide regular donations. We'll cover all medical expenses, provide comprehensive health insurance, and work around your schedule. My brain couldn't process this. 20 minutes ago, I was a broke, divorced failure who couldn't scrape together rent money. Now a billionaire was offering me enough money to retire for life. I need time to think about this. Of course. Take all the time you need. Robert handed me a business card. My personal cell is on there. Call me day or night. I left the plasma center in a daze, walked the 3 blocks back to my depressing studio, and just sat on the futon staring at Robert Sterling's business card. Then I called the only person I trusted, my sister Kate. She's a paralegal in Chicago. Sharp as a knife. Doesn't take garbage from anyone. Kate, something insane just happened and I need your help. I explained everything. She was silent for a long moment. Ethan, you need a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. You need someone who handles intellectual property and medical contracts. This is way bigger than 15 million. If your blood is this valuable, you need to protect yourself. I can't afford a lawyer. You're about to be able to afford a dozen lawyers. Look, I have a friend from law school, Diana Chen. Wait, scratch that. I have a friend, Diana Patterson. She specializes in pharmaceutical contracts. Let me call her. Don't sign anything until she reviews it. 2 days later, I met Diana Patterson in her downtown office. She was maybe 40, all business, the kind of lawyer who reads contracts for fun. Mr. Williams, your sister briefed me on the situation. I've reviewed Sterling Pharmaceuticals' financial reports and market position. 15 million is insulting. It's more money than I've ever had in my life. It's also a fraction of what your genetic material is worth. Kellerman syndrome affects approximately 1,200 families in the United States alone, maybe 8,000 worldwide. If Sterling can develop a treatment using your plasma, they're looking at a multi-billion-dollar market, and you're the only source. She pulled out her laptop, showed me spreadsheets. Here's what we're going to ask for. 18 million upfront, not 10. 5% royalty on every treatment sold in perpetuity. Comprehensive medical care for life. A seat on the company's medical advisory board with voting rights. And we retain the right to negotiate with other pharmaceutical companies if Sterling can't or won't develop the treatment within a reasonable time frame. They'll never agree to that. They will, because you're the only game in town. Without you, they have nothing. Their 32-year search ends in failure, and hundreds of children keep dying. They'll pay. She was right. Diana handled all negotiations. Robert Sterling pushed back on the royalty percentage, tried to cap it at 2%. Diana showed him projections of what the treatment could generate, pointed out that 5% of billions was still billions for them. They settled on 5% with a floor. Even if sales were low, I'd get minimum annual payments. The advisory board seat was harder. Sterling didn't want to set precedent of giving donors voting power. Diana argued that my unique position and ongoing contributions warranted it. They compromised. Advisory seat with voting rights on matters related to Kellerman's research, limited influence on other company business. 3 weeks after walking into that plasma center, hoping to make $40, I watched an $8 million wire transfer hit my bank account. The remaining $10 million came 2 days later, split between accounts Diana had set up, investment accounts, trusts, structures designed to protect the money. I sat in my studio apartment, staring at my phone screen showing balances I couldn't process. From $183 to $18 million in less than a month. My first call was to my landlord, paid the next year's rent in advance. My second call was to my mom. Mom, remember how I said things were looking up? I wasn't lying. I need you to sit down. But here's the thing about suddenly having money. You realize pretty quick that it doesn't fix everything. I was still divorced. I was still living in a depressing studio. I still had no job, no purpose, no direction. The money solved my survival problems, but it didn't solve the emptiness. That's when Diana suggested something. You should start a foundation. The tax benefits alone make it worth it. But more importantly, it gives you control over how this treatment gets distributed. Sterling will charge market rates because they're a pharmaceutical company. You can help the families who can't afford it. So I started the William Sterling Foundation for Kellerman's research. The name was Robert's suggestion. He insisted on being included because this is bigger than both of us. The foundation's mission was simple: ensure every child diagnosed with Kellerman's syndrome got access to the treatment, regardless of their family's ability to pay. Sterling agreed to provide the treatment to foundation-approved families at cost. I covered the difference between cost and market price. For the first time in my life, I had purpose that went beyond marketing campaigns and quarterly reports. The first patient was an 8-year-old girl named Lily. Her parents, Tom and Michelle, had exhausted their savings, maxed out credit cards, started a crowdfunding campaign that barely made a dent in the projected costs. The treatment would cost $180,000 per year for at least 3 years. They couldn't afford it. I got their case file one afternoon, read through Lily's medical history, saw photos of this smiling kid who loved drawing and had wanted to be a veterinarian. Her symptoms had started when she was 6, dropped her pencil during art class one day, and couldn't pick it up properly. Over the next year, she went from active kid to needing a wheelchair. Her drawings went from detailed animals to shaky stick figures to nothing because she couldn't hold a pencil anymore. Through the foundation, we covered it completely. I met Lily 3 months into her treatment at the Sterling Research Facility. She was in physical training, working with an occupational trainer on hand coordination. They had her picking up small blocks, stacking them, simple tasks that most 8-year-olds could do without thinking. She picked up a block with her left hand, slowly, carefully, but she did it, placed it on top of another block. The trainer smiled and made a note on her clipboard. Lily looked up at her mom with this expression of pure joy. "I did it! Mom, did you see? I picked it up!" Michelle started crying, just completely broke down right there in the training room. Tom put his arm around her, and he was crying too. I stood there like an idiot, not knowing what to do with my hands, feeling my own throat get tight. Later, Michelle showed me a video on her phone. Lily running around their backyard, chasing their dog, laughing. This was recent, maybe 2 weeks ago. The same kid who couldn't hold a pencil 6 months earlier was running and playing like any healthy 8-year-old. "You gave us our daughter back," Michelle sobbed, grabbing my hands. "We thought we were going to lose her. We were planning her funeral. And now she's talking about what she wants to be for Halloween. She wants to be a superhero because she says you're her superhero." That's when it hit me. This was worth more than any amount of money. This wasn't about the dollars. It was about kids who were dying getting a chance to live. It was about parents who'd given up hope finding a reason to hope again. I went home that night, sat in my still mostly unfurnished apartment, and just cried. First time I'd cried since the divorce finalized. But these weren't sad tears. They were relief and purpose and the overwhelming realization that my life actually meant something now. Over 6 months, 42 children received treatment through the foundation. 42 families who'd been planning funerals started planning birthdays again. The foundation's newsletter shared updates. Lily could write full sentences now. A 6-year-old named Connor took his first steps in 8 months. A 9-year-old named Sophie returned to school. Robert Sterling and I had lunch monthly to discuss the research and foundation work. He treated me like an equal partner, asked my opinion on research directions, invited me to board meetings. The man who'd lost his daughter 32 years ago had turned his grief into something that saved lives. "Rebecca would have liked you," he told me once over coffee. "She wanted to be a doctor, said she was going to cure diseases. In a way, you're doing what she never got the chance to do." Then 2 months ago, everything shifted again. I got a call from Diana. "Ethan, have you been watching the news about Morrison and Associates?" "No, why would I?" "Federal prosecutors just announced charges against several employees for embezzlement. They've been investigating for 8 months. You might want to sit down." She sent me a link. The headline made my blood run cold. Former marketing executives charged in multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme. The article detailed how someone had been systematically stealing from Morrison and Associates for over 3 years. Created fake vendor accounts with names like Premier Marketing Solutions and Strategic Brand Consulting LLC, companies that sounded legitimate but didn't actually exist. They'd approve fraudulent invoices for services never rendered, then divert payments to offshore accounts. The total theft was close to $4.3 million. The names charged: Brandon Walsh and Jessica Williams, my former business partner and my ex-wife. The article went into detail about how the scheme worked. Brandon, as head of vendor relations, had the authority to approve new vendors and sign off on contracts up to $50,000 without additional oversight. Jessica, who'd worked in accounts payable before we married, knew exactly how the payment systems worked, knew which controls existed and which ones were more lax. They'd started small, Invoices for $5,000 here and there, amounts that wouldn't trigger additional scrutiny. But over 3 years, they got bolder. The fake invoices grew larger. They created elaborate paper trails, fake contracts, even fake email exchanges between vendor representatives and Morrison staff. One shell company alone had billed the firm for $780,000 in strategic consulting services over 18 months. The dots connected instantly. Brandon had been in charge of vendor relations for the last 4 years, brought on board specifically to streamline that process. Jessica had worked in accounts payable before we married, knew the systems inside and out. They'd been having an affair and stealing money together, probably for years. The timeline was damning. The thefts increased dramatically in the months before I got laid off. In fact, the article specifically mentioned that the company's financial troubles, the same troubles that led to my termination and 5 other layoffs, were partly caused by this embezzlement. Company leadership thought they were hemorrhaging money due to lost clients and poor performance. But really, they were bleeding from internal theft. They'd helped create the crisis that cost me my job. Then Jessica filed for divorce the day after. She'd taken everything from me in the divorce while sitting on millions in stolen money. The trip to Cancun she'd bragged about, funded by theft, the new car Brandon was driving, stolen money, the condo they'd moved into together downtown, the one with the rooftop pool and views of the city, stolen money. The article quoted the federal prosecutor. This was a sophisticated scheme that involved creating an elaborate fiction of legitimate business operations. The defendants showed a pattern of escalating theft and increasingly brazen disregard for both their employer and basic ethical standards. They prioritized personal enrichment over the livelihoods of their colleagues. I sat there reading that last line over and over. Their theft had contributed to the layoffs, my termination, the financial devastation that followed, the months of eating ramen and selling my blood for rent money, partly caused by Brandon and Jessica's criminal enterprise. I felt sick, then angry, then something like vindication. The universe had delivered justice in a way I never could have orchestrated. Not just justice, poetic, ironic, perfect justice. While I'd been struggling to survive, thinking I was worthless, they'd been living high on stolen money, and now it was all coming down around them. Diana called again. The prosecutors want to talk to you. You might be called as a witness about the company's financial situation during your employment. You're not in any trouble. You were one of their victims. The layoffs, the divorce timing, all of it supports the prosecution's case that they were covering their tracks. I met with the federal prosecutors the following week, gave them everything I remembered about company finances, Brandon's access to vendor accounts, Jessica's knowledge of the payment systems. They had most of what they needed already, but my testimony helped establish timeline and motive. They got sloppy, one prosecutor explained, started spending conspicuously. New cars, expensive vacations, a condo they shouldn't have been able to afford. Someone at the company noticed discrepancies in vendor payments, reported it to corporate, and corporate called us. Once we started pulling threads, the whole thing unraveled. The trial was scheduled for 4 months out. I wouldn't have to testify in person unless the defense demanded it, which seemed unlikely given how airtight the case was. Then last week, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Ethan, it's Jessica. Her voice was different. Not the cheerful mockery from our last call. Not the confidence of someone who thought she'd won. This was desperation. Ethan, I need help. Brandon and I are in serious trouble. The charges, the legal fees. I need money. We're going to lose everything. I said nothing. Let the silence stretch. Are you there? Please, Ethan. I know things ended badly between us, but we were married for 17 years. That has to count for something. I'm begging you. You called me the night our divorce finalized, I said quietly. Do you remember what you told me? I was angry. I didn't mean... You told me I'd die alone and broke. You told me I was boring. That Brandon said you should have left me years ago. Then you laughed. You actually laughed. I'm sorry. I was wrong about everything. Please, we're desperate. You and Brandon destroyed my career. You stole from the company, caused the financial crisis that got me fired, then took everything I owned in the divorce. While you were spending stolen money on trips and cars, and your new life together, we'll pay it back. We'll make it right. I just need help with the legal fees. Please, Ethan. You were always so kind, so understanding. Maybe we could work something out? I thought about Lily running around her backyard, laughing. Thought about Connor taking his first steps. Thought about Sophie going back to school. 42 kids who were alive because of something I could give. No. What? No. You made your choices, Jessica. You chose to steal. You chose to have an affair with my business partner. You chose to file for divorce the day I lost my job. You chose to call me and mock me when I had nothing. Those were your choices. Now you get to live with the consequences. You're going to let me go to prison? I'm not doing anything to you. The federal government is prosecuting you for crimes you committed. I'm just declining to fund your defense with money you think I don't have. What does that mean? It means you were wrong about me dying alone and broke. I'm not alone. I'm surrounded by people who value me. I'm not broke. I'm doing better than I ever did. And I'm doing work that actually matters. Work that saves children's lives. While you were stealing and lying and destroying people, I was building something real. Please. You told me I'd die alone and broke. You were wrong. But you're learning exactly what it feels like to lose everything. Good luck with your sad little life. Don't call me again. I hung up. The trial concluded yesterday. Brandon got 7 years in federal prison. Jessica got 5. Full restitution ordered, though they'd already spent most of what they'd stolen. Their assets got seized. The condo, the cars, the bank accounts, everything. I didn't attend the sentencing. Didn't need to. Diana called with the update, and that was enough. Kate called earlier today. So I heard Jessica and Brandon got sentenced. How do you feel? Honestly, I feel nothing. They're not my problem anymore. I've got actual problems to focus on, like whether the foundation should expand to other rare diseases, or if I should get Max a brother, or if Robert's right that I should consider running for the Sterling board full-time. Look at you, all responsible and adult, she laughed. Who knew plasma donation would be your turning point? Technically, I never even got the $40. They didn't pay me once they realized what they'd found. The greatest investment you never made. I'm looking at Max now, watching his paws twitch while he dreams. The house is quiet in a good way. Not the oppressive silence of the studio apartment, but the peaceful quiet of a place that's actually home. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true.